Right, hi, I'm Sara Penrose from Sara Penrose Limited. Just to introduce myself, I'm a chartered chemical engineer with over 25 years work experience in food industry, in the resin industry, nuclear industry and chemical industry, doing various things from design through to commissioning, testing, all sorts of different project management, multidisciplinary teams. So I've had I've really enjoyed my career, but now I run, with my business partner, a business that optimises performance to achieve objectives by refining core skills. So I'm about trying to find that capability in your team. So we've heard a lot today about being able to provide the needs for the diversity in your teams. We're about trying to get the capability so that both, the business and the people benefit from realising their capability, but the business benefits in achieving those objectives as well. So that's what we're all about. Today, I just want to go through a bit of a case study. So one of my experiences, it was to manage for the UK site while I was in the food industry, the implementation of a huge ERP system. You might have heard of it, it's SAP. Just a small thing. Other ERP systems are available, but it was done across 8 different countries. 8 different sites, 6 different countries, and we went live with about 8 different modules all on the same day. So it was a huge undertaking. We're talking about very large sites running very large about 5 30-ton per hour lines, creating products from different raw materials as well. So this is in the food industry. We were starch and glucose manufacturers, and we got our starch and glucose from different peas, potatoes, wheat. So there was lots of different inputs and considerations to take into consideration. So I was in charge of translating the UK plant from engineering speak into ERP speak. That's how I understood it. So it was really about how we actually did it, all the systems, the people, the machines, how we built that into SAP. So the reason I want to go through this is I want to go through it in a way of how we run our business now. So the lessons we've learned in industry is how we run our business now. So we refine these core skills of critical thinking, lateral thinking and problem solving. And we start off with asking questions. Okay, so that's about gaining information and eliminating assumption. So what sort of questions do you need to ask for an ERP system? First of all, why are you doing this and what is the objective? And I think sometimes you can lose yourself in the idea of having this fantastic system, which is great. I'm not a Luddite. I really celebrate the advances of technology and AI. I think it's great. I think it can provide great advantages to people's businesses, but you really do need to focus on what you want. So for example, I think the project that I worked on, their main objective was about consistency, and consistency across its global position, and so that they could measure and have common KPIs in order to monitor and measure performance. That might not have been so appropriate if they'd wanted to really drill down on efficiency, because if you want consistency and comparing things across site to site, you have to look a little bit of a wider perspective, and perhaps you miss some of the details and some of the details efficiencies of plant to plant different idiosyncrasies that I think may have been overlooked and missed looking back on that project. But that was the overall objective of the project I worked on. So what is your objective? If you're going to go down that road of further automation and ERP systems, what do you want them to do? And not just what do you want them to do, what would the people in your team want them to do? How are you going to make their life easier? And why that's important is if you make people's life easier, or you show them how it's going to save them time, it's going to provide them guarantees of getting things right first time and delivering what the customer wants, then you're going to get more engagement. So this is all about not just doing all the work and preparing for change and giving to your people, it's also about what you can get back from them. And I think that's really important. We've talked a lot about what you give to your diverse team, but this is all a two-way process here. You know, if the business doesn't run well, they're not going to have any jobs. So it's a two-way street, and you'll both get advantages from it if you understand what they're going to get from the system as well, the way they work, how that's going to change and how that's going to benefit them. That's what will get you that engagement. And that's what a lot of companies miss, is the opportunity. It's an opportunity for you as business leaders to actually get people engaged, on board, and making you more money. How does your business work? Well, you know how your business works, but do you? I know I have always got more things to learn about every single job and every single moment I'm running my company. There's always things to learn, always things that I think, oh yes, Sara, that's another assumption you've made. Okay, so we go along, we're confident in our product, we know it's good, we know it's great, and it is. But it can always, always, always be better. There's always more capacity to realise. And I think that's an important realisation. So when you're looking about how your business works for automation, don't be afraid to ask those simple questions. You know, how does that work? Why are those lights on? Why is that alarm sounding? Oh, you don't need to worry about that alarm. Why is that? You know, is it really, actually, it's a motor misalignment alarm that just keeps going off, and it goes off, but the same maintenance guy or girl goes to that pump and maintains the pump, does exactly the same process, goes away again, and you've got used to that alarm that goes off constantly. Actually, is it something that could actually save the company a lot of money? So how does your business work, and how do different departments interact with each other? That's also part of how your business works. Do the different departments talk with each other? On the project I worked on, it was imperative to talk to different departments, but that was quite a learning curve for me, from being in engineering and talking to production, usually bossing production about and annoying them. But then all of a sudden I'm talking to purchasing people, sales people, accounts, talking about all sorts of different finance reports, and it was a completely different world. And I was like, well, why don't you understand that you need to know this? And it was quite a learning curve and a misalignment of information. You think you're talking about the same thing, but are you? So how does your business work? What are the components of your existing processes? What are the inputs to the system? So how is all of this going to affect things like your suppliers? How is it going to affect your customers, most importantly? Why are you doing it? How are your customers going to benefit from you taking this system on board? And what work would the system be performing? You know, I've just said to you, we did about 8 different modules. So we did warehousing, production, finance, goods in. We did, oh gosh, I can't remember them all now. But we did a very broad range. One of the ones we didn't do, but we thought we were going to do, was maintenance. And maintenance provided us with a lot more complexity than we'd anticipated for. So we kind of ditched the maintenance module early on. We said we'd go back to it, and they never did. But you've got to decide, what is the system going to be performing, and then what are the consequences of that? Yeah? What are the consequences of that? Where's the joining points, those interfaces that you need to look at? What will be the system outputs? Okay, so what are you going to do with that information? What information is it going to provide you? Is it going to be quicker? Is it going to be more accurate? And what are you going to do with it? And who would be responsible for entering the data? Are you going to create more work in some ways? And is that going to be perceived as more work by some people rather than saving time? It might save you time because you've got figures coming to you, but maybe for one of your team, you're actually creating a lot more work. When would go live be, and what are the milestones to get there? So there's lots of questions to ask, and some of those seem quite obvious. Do not ever be afraid to ask obvious questions. They're never obvious to everybody. Okay, so obvious questions can often, if they're not asked, trip you up several months down the line and cost you an awful lot more time and money if you don't ask them up front. And then obviously who to involve and when. And it's already been covered. Communication is absolutely key. How are you going to communicate? How are you going to actually communicate and train people? And I would always say that actually you want to involve people early on. What you don't want is the fancy contractors coming in and with their smart suits just appearing out of the blue, and half your team didn't even know they were going to turn up, and then that's when the fear starts to set in. Communication, give out more than you perhaps feel comfortable with, and have a little bit of faith in the people that you've got in your team. They're your greatest asset, and you need to build that trust. It needs to be, again, that two-way thing, trusting them and them trusting you. So that has to come from you. So next is analysis, understanding that information. You've asked all these lovely questions. Now you need to actually quantify and qualify what you're doing. So your team of people, their roles versus reality. We've all got those people that have been there for a long time. They know their stuff inside and out, but they actually do a lot more than their roles say they do, yeah? You actually rely on them a lot more than you realise, and a lot of what they do goes unsaid and unseen. And there might be all sorts of causes and consequences of that. But really, if you're going to make a big change, you need to start looking at these factors. And believe me, it might seem like a lot of work up front, but the more thinking you do up front, the less pain you have down the line. Every single time, believe me. I've managed hundreds of projects, up to millions and millions of pounds worth of projects. And believe me, every single time, if you don't put the thinking in up front, you waste far more time and money down the road. Okay, so it is worth really looking at this. What knowledge have people got? What experience have they got? You know, talking about the diversity of your people. And Gen Z, sorry, I'm not really up to date with what generation it is, but these Gen Zs, they can, as well as what their needs might be, and they might be more forthcoming what they need, thinking about what you can get out of them. They have some very different ways of thinking, some very inspiring ways to think and to tackle problems. So there's a real richness of capacity and capability that you can discover from Gen Z. So it's not just about making sure that you've provided for their needs, but it's also getting out of them their rich source of knowledge and experience, because their experience, although it's quite not as voluminous as the rest of us and as long, there is some very different experiences and very different ways of seeing things that can really bring value to your project, your ERP system project. Don't forget about your customers and suppliers. Absolutely vital not to forget about them. How is what you're going to do affect the customers and the suppliers? Will it stagger your production and your production processes? Will that really slow things down? It's not just about the before and the after, it's the during the project. How is everything going to be disrupted? Are you going to go all live on the same day, or are you going to stagger it? If you're going to stagger it, how's that going to work? How are you going to interface with the existing processes as you do that changeover? Are you going to completely rely on the contractors that you've brought in to manage that process? Or are you going to envelop the whole team and get everybody, well, not everybody necessarily, but a good breadth of the company involved and engaged in the process so that you've got a smoother transition, so that you don't upset your customers and equally your suppliers. Don't forget about your suppliers. I think that was something that we learned early on in the project, especially with the warehousing module, because obviously a lot of goods are coming into the warehouse for supplies, engineering supplies, raw materials, and how that was managed and how we interfaced with the suppliers was a really important consideration. And nobody else knows that information apart from you. Okay, so the usual process mapping and gap analysis. Gap analysis is all about really understanding your business, but gap analysis, skills gaps, performance gaps, there's all sorts of different gap analysis that you can do, but just putting a bit of time into each of these. Delegate these jobs out. I'm not saying you should do, as the business owner, you should do all of this yourself. You can delegate out this analysis. You don't have to do it all yourself, but that's part of getting people engaged and involved in the overall project. And then you get people on board, but you get the facts and you can prepare. What KPIs do you want from your system? Navigating the data. How are your people going to navigate the data? Your key performance indicators, sorry. I don't like acronyms, so I apologise for putting that one up there without the full lettering, full wording. Sometimes less is more. So when you're dealing with ERP systems, where are you going to draw your rectangle? So as an engineer, whenever I'm faced with any problem, I draw a rectangle. What's coming in, what's going out, but it's all about where you draw the limits of that rectangle. What's within that rectangle? So have you included all your production lines in that rectangle, or your departments, or are you dealing with, are they overlapping departments on a particular type of workflow? Be very careful about where you're doing it. So sometimes less could be more in terms of you could just choose less boxes and have big boxes accompanying a lot, so that could be less is more in that capacity. Or you could actually say, well, actually within the box I only want a little concentrated particular set of machines and people, so that I can really sort of micromanage that a bit more. So having less in box but more boxes. So how do you want to do that, and how would you want to manage that? All sorts of these considerations. And attention to the system, people at interface points. Okay, I'm going to zoom on a little bit. Innovation is the next step, okay? Thinking about things differently. Now, this is a step that I think a lot of companies don't do, and I think it's a great step that you can really, really gain a lot of value from. It's about building in flexibility to your plans, and this is really, I think, the bit where you can get the most engagement into this change, and the most onboarding of change is built in innovation. So how can you think about this change differently? How would you need to build in flexibility? So dealing with different what-if scenarios. What if, I don't know, half your team went off ill? What if that particular machine, which is part of your critical path, what if that went down? What if one of your raw materials suddenly changed its spec overnight and then didn't function as well? So would it throw your figures out? Would it throw your KPIs out? And how would you realise that understanding? How would you know that that change has been made if all the coding for your ERP system hasn't noticed there's been a slight change in spec on your raw material? It can have a serious knock-on effect, but if it's not picked up via communication with your suppliers and your coding for your ERP system, then it might cause you real problems. So really thinking about all these different what-if scenarios and how they might affect different things can be quite a fun exercise to do. You can try and visualise what that looks like, how it works, and what we did in our project for the SAP project that we did, we had a massive warehouse full of people testing what-if scenarios. Bearing in mind this was a global project, it was massive, but it was like a weird people farm, just pockets of people working on different what-if scenarios. But it really worked, and it was actually quite fun. It was made something that was quite dull and boring, quite interesting and interactive. And it made the eventual training a lot more fun as well, because we could bring that into the reasons why that people were learning things. Because I think sometimes when you just tell people how something works, or press this button or press that button, it doesn't stick in. They don't care. But if you tell them why you have to press button X and button Y, then they're much more engaged and much more likely to add to it and be able to adapt to any change that comes further down the line. I'm in danger of going way over time here, so don't be afraid of entertaining the ridiculous. Explore unlikely scenarios, okay? And then we come to the actual solving, answering the problem, making decisions. But you've done all that work up front, so this step, solve, should be nice and easy. Really nice and easy. You've done all the hard work, you've got all the ideas, you've got the engagement, you've got all the understanding, you've asked loads of crazy questions, and you're really able to quickly make some very good decisions that are going to help you have a successful outcome. Don't forget that the show must go on. I've got 1 minute and the show must go on. So, planning. You must plan, because you need to maintain your production, your outputs as you go through this ERP system. And you really need to put that thought into how you're going to resource that. Commissioning testing I've talked about, training and handover. Last but not least, and please do not forget this step, review. What worked well, the importance of recognition, the engagement and legacy. So if you don't review, when you're installing an ERP system, you need to review quite regularly. You don't just leave it all to the end. You need to have regular reviews to see where you are, but also have that review at the end. So you can almost have a bit of a debrief, what didn't work well. Always celebrate first, celebrate what worked well, not just the outputs, because it could be a complete disaster. But if you've all worked well as a team and got greater understanding, then there's still a value in appreciating that. Then you go into your debrief, what didn't work well, and what lessons have you learned, and how would you tweak that going forward. There's a lot of lessons you can implement very quickly, and if you're all working together well as a team and you're engaged, then that can happen a lot smoother. So I think that brings my presentation to a conclusion.